Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of Improv Ideas. Today we are going to be diving into the topic of bebop scales. This will be one of many episodes that we do covering this topic, as there are a wide variety of different types of these scales. And these scales can be a great tool for expanding your improvisation a bit and adding some more chromaticism to your playing, especially if you're already comfortable with all of your modes. And typically what a bebop scale is a mode from either the major scale, the melodic minor, or harmonic minor scale, and it has one additional chromatic note that's added in between two scale notes. So they all happen in different spots depending on which scale you're doing, but all bebop scales are 8-note scales. They are just a regular 7-note scale, but there's an additional chromatic note added, which gives you that chromaticism. So today we're going to start out with the major bebop scale, so I'm going to do everything in the key of G. And if you would like fingerings of all of the scales that I go over today, as well as fingerings for the arpeggios and 5 licks within this scale, you can head over to patreon.com/MikeAudetteMusic. So we're going to start out with our G major scale. Let's just play it regular starting out. So intervallically we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to 8. Now, to make this a major bebop scale, the chromatic note is going to happen between the 5 and the 6. Okay, between our D and E note. So in between these notes, we're going to put a D sharp. Okay, so it's going to have a sharp 5. So now, intervallically, a G major bebop scale would be this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sharp 5, 6, 7, and back to root. Then if we go up the octave, it'd be this. And as you can see, just adding that half step between the 5 and the 6, right, that sharp 5, already gives us more of a bebop-y sort of sound, hence the name bebop scale, obviously. So just like when we're doing our regular modes of the major scale, there are multiple different positions where we can play this scale on the neck. So I'm just going to run through all of these fingerings really quick, just so you can see what they look like and how they line up on the neck. And then we'll talk about some ideas for improvising around this scale. So the root position, like we just discussed, would be this. Okay, now the next position would be this. So I'm basically just going through all of the modes of the major scale, and anytime I see the D note, which is the 5 against G, I'm adding the chromatic between that. So that's what's happening with these fingerings. Now our next position would be this, starting on B. Okay, then starting on C, we would have the same position, but starting on C instead of B. Then the next fingering would start on D, so we have the chromatic right off the bat, right, because the chromatic happens between D and E. So this fingering would be this. Okay, the next fingering would start on E, and that would give us this. Then the last fingering, starting on the major 7th interval, would be the same thing as the first one, but we're just, starting on the 7 rather than the root. So whenever we're doing any of these scales, the end goal is to be as comfortable as you can with all of the different fingerings throughout the neck. But I know that that can be overwhelming for some people starting out. So I would recommend just starting out in one position, get as comfortable as you can within that position. And then when you feel like you're ready to expand on that, then maybe try a couple of different positions on the neck and see if you could start maneuvering between all of them. Okay, so that covers the scale fingerings. Now let's talk about some different ways that we can maneuver around the chromaticism within this scale. So let's just stick to our third position. And I'm going to stay mostly up here because this is an easy spot to visualize. So this is the 5th of our G, right? So the chromatic is 5, sharp 5, 6, right? So a lot of people will just use it, just go straight up and down. You know, stuff like that. Just going right up and down. And that's like one of the most kind of traditional ways to utilize it, is just straight up and down chromatic, or just straight down or straight up. Right, and so that is obviously one of the ways that it can be utilized, but something that I like to do as well is take these notes and mix the order of them, because that can give you a little bit more of an outside sound, because this sharp 5 right here, that does give us a pretty, you know, in the context of like G major, being that note being the sharp 5, that can definitely produce some outside sort of sounds against a major chord. So rather than just going like 5, sharp 5, 6, or 6, sharp 5, 5, we can do stuff like this. We could start on the sharp 5 and go, right, sharp 5, 6, 5, something like that, right? Or we could start on the 6, then go to the 5, and then go to the sharp 5. Then we're landing on more of a dissonant note, right? But anytime I would land on a note like that, if I'm doing a line, I would always resolve it at some point. So, you know, something like that. And then another one that we can also do is the sharp 5 down to the natural 5 and then up to the 6. Right, so right there, landing on the 6. Right, so rather than just using it straight chromatically, going up and down the 3 notes, I like to try to mix and match the 3 notes in any combination possible and see if I can weave in and out some different scale notes within that, and just gives you some new sounds to experiment with, some interesting notes that you can start on and figure out ways to resolve it. So I would recommend trying to, you know, extrapolate on that and come up with as many different combinations and different resolutions that you can come up with within these scales. So that's some ways that you can maneuver around the actual chromatics. Now we will get into the arpeggios within the scale. So because of the addition of the sharp 5 in this scale, that gives us a couple more arpeggios than we would typically encounter in a straight G major scale. So I'll go over a couple of those. So one of the most common chord movements that we do hear a lot that lines up in the Major Bebop Scale is a major chord or a major arpeggio, G major, and then you go to G augmented, where you raise the 5 up a half step, and then go up another half step and make it a G6 chord. You can call this G6 or E minor, whichever one you prefer. I typically just call it G6 because it's, you know, G major, G augmented. I tend to just think of the whole thing as like a G tonality. So you've probably heard that a lot. Right? So you can take this movement. You can just do straight arpeggios. Or you can add some scale notes in addition to the arpeggios, or just add some scale notes around this chromatic movement right here. So, right, I think there's a Gershwin song that has a melody really similar to that, but that's a movement that we hear all over the place, and now that we're talking about it more, you might notice it even more so when it pops up in a song, because it has a very specific sound to it. So there are a couple of other really great arpeggios that line up within this scale. Some of them have a little bit more of an outside sound, so use them accordingly depending on what setting you're playing in. One of them that I really like is the E minor major 7 arpeggio. Right, that works technically because if we look at these notes in relation to G, the E is our 6, the G is our root, the B is our 3rd, and then this D sharp is the sharp 5. So we're using the 6 and the sharp 5, but rather than doing them right next to each other, we actually are doing them with this major 7 interval, which, right, very outside, like I said. So use it accordingly. But the nice thing about that arpeggio is, you know, when you get to that D sharp, that's the outside note, but all you have to do is go up a half step and it resolves to the 6. Right? So that's a great one. I really like using that one. And you can mix that with just a straight E minor arpeggio. Or even E minor 7, right? You could use this little chromatic movement that we were doing on the 2nd string and just put an E minor arpeggio underneath it. Right, changes it up slightly. It's very similar to what we did here. but rather than having the G note on the bottom, you have the E note on the bottom, which changes it a little bit, but very similar. Another one that we can do that I really like is a major arpeggio with a sharp 5 added to it. So that would be a G major arpeggio, 1, 3, 5, and sharp 5. So I love the combination of the 5 and the sharp 5. That gives you a really great sound. Once again, a little bit more outside, so use it accordingly depending on what setting you're in, but that's a great sound as well. Right, so right there I combined the E minor major 7 and then the G major with the added sharp 5. Alright, so many great sounds that you can do within this. And like I said, because of the addition of that sharp 5, a lot of these arpeggios and a lot of these movements will give us a little bit more of an outside sound, give us more of that augmented sound from the sharp 5. But, you know, these are, like I said, great things to add to your playing, to expand your chromaticism a little bit, and give you some notes to start implementing that you may not have really used before. You know, a lot of people wouldn't really think to use a sharp 5 over a major chord, but it can be done very effectively, and there are so many different ways to maneuver around that. Okay, so that covers some of my favorite arpeggios that line up within this scale. Now I'm going to do a little demonstration so you can hear what this sounds like against a major tonality. Okay, now I'm just going to improvise for a bit over a G major 7 vamp, and I'll try to incorporate all of the different stuff we talked about today so you can hear what it sounds like. So here we go. Watch, if I have a line kind of centered around the sharp 5, it's a lot more outside. But then if I resolve it to the regular 5, right, I have that resolution. Right, so I try to resolve it when I can. Now I'll do the major arpeggio with the sharp 5. Alright, so as you can see, we can get a lot of different sounds out of this scale. We can get much more of a bebop-y, chromatic sort of sound, but also depending on how we target the notes and whether or not we want to center our phrases around that sharp 5 or if we want to resolve them, we can get much more of an outside sound. So this is a very versatile scale and something that can really open up some new sounds in your playing. It's, like I said, especially if you're already familiar with your modes and comfortable with your major scales all across the neck. So that is it. That is our episode for this week. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully this gives you some new sounds to start incorporating into your playing. And like I said, if you would like access to all of the scale fingerings, all of the arpeggios that we covered, as well as 5 licks in this scale, you can head over to patreon.com/MikeAudetteMusic. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you at the next episode. Take care.